Hey guys, tonight we are going to turn off the notifications, put down the screens, and travel back to a time when entertainment meant watching a log burn for 3 hours or betting on which of your neighbor's chickens would cross the road first. We're exploring the strange, sometimes violent, and often baffling things medieval people did for fun. You might think you know what boredom feels like when the internet goes down, but trust me, until you've spent a rainy November evening in a 12th century hut with nothing but a block of wood and a dull knife, you have no idea. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are sitting on a wooden bench that is actively sucking the warmth out of your body. It is the middle of winter in the year 1240, somewhere in rural England. The sun went down around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, plunging the world into a darkness so complete it feels heavy, like a physical weight pressing against the windows. You are inside your home, which is a generous term for a single room with a dirt floor, wattle and daub walls that leak drafts like a sieve, and a central hearth that is currently smoking more than it is burning. You have eaten your pottage, you have mended your tools, you have stared at the family pig, which sleeps in the corner for about 20 minutes. And now, you are faced with the great, crushing reality of medieval existence. You have absolutely nothing to do. In the modern world, we fear boredom. We fill every second of silence with podcasts, scrolling, or streaming. But here, boredom is not a gap in your schedule. It is the atmosphere. It is the air you breathe. There is no artificial light to extend the day, save for the flickering fire and perhaps a rushlight, a reed dipped in animal fat that burns with a dim, smelly, sputtering flame. Lighting a beeswax candle is out of the question. That's burning money. So you sit in the gloaming, the shadows stretching long and dancing on the walls like ghosts. Your senses heighten in the absence of stimulation. You become acutely aware of the smell of wet wool drying by the fire, the damp earth scent of the floor, and the rhythmic snoring of your grandfather in the corner. The silence is profound, broken only by the wind howling outside or the settling of the timber frame. It is a silence that forces you inward, trapping you with your own thoughts, which, given the general state of medieval life, plague, famine, taxes, are probably not particularly cheerful thoughts. Mainstream historical fact. The concept of leisure time was fundamentally different in the Middle Ages. For the peasantry, the day was governed by the sun. When it was light, you worked. When it was dark, you slept. But in the winter, the nights were 14, maybe 15 hours long. You can't sleep for 15 hours. So, there was this massive, dark void of time called the evening that had to be filled or it would drive you mad. You look at your hands. They are calloused and ingrained with dirt that no amount of cold water will wash away. You could whittle. You pick up a piece of firewood and your knife. You carve a point on it. Then you carve the point off. Then you make it round. It's not art. It's just something to keep your hands moving so you don't think about how cold your feet are. This state of profound listlessness was something the church actually had a name for, acedia. While often translated as sloth, it was more complex than just laziness. It was a spiritual apathy, a weariness of the soul that struck when the monotony of life became too much to bear. Monks in their cells fought it with prayer. You, in your drafty hall, fight it by poking the fire with a stick and wondering if a spark will land on the cat. Historians still argue about whether medieval peasants were truly bored in the modern sense. Some suggest that without the constant dopamine hits of modern technology, their brains were wired differently, capable of slipping into long states of meditative stillness that we would find excruciating. Others argue that human beings are human beings, and sitting in the dark for 4 hours every night was just as mind-numbing for a serf in 1240 as it would be for you today. Judging by the sheer number of weird games they invented involving hitting things with sticks, the boredom theory seems to hold water. You try to start a conversation with your sibling. "Cold tonight," you say. "Aye," they reply. "Colder than yesterday, you think?" "Might be." "Think it'll snow?" "Maybe." The conversation dies. You have exhausted the meteorological topic. You don't discuss politics because you don't know any, other than that the lord of the manor wants more grain. You don't discuss the news because the news travels at the speed of a walking man, and no one has walked by in 3 weeks. You are isolated in a bubble of time, cut off from the rest of the world by the simple fact of night. So, you turn to the only entertainment center available, the fire itself. This is fire gazing, the medieval equivalent of television. You watch the logs shift. You watch the colors change from orange to blue to white. You look for shapes in the embers. Is that a dragon? A castle? A demon coming to take your soul because you didn't pay your tithe? The fire is hypnotic. It is warm. It is moving. And it is the only thing in the room that is alive with energy. There is a quirky fringe tidbit that suggests some people believed salamanders lived in fire. You stare intently at the flames, hoping to see a magical lizard scurrying among the coals. You don't see one, just ash. It is a disappointment, but a mild one, because your expectations were already very low. To break the monotony, someone suggests a riddle. Riddles were huge in the Middle Ages. They were the portable, equipment-free ways to prove you were smarter than your relatives. I have a mouth, but do not speak. I have a bed, but do not sleep. What am I? You groan. It's a river. Everyone knows it's a river. Uncle Thomas told that one last week. A river, you say flatly. Aye, the asker says, looking defeated. It's a river. Silence descends again. The dog sighs. The pig grunts. You shift on the bench, and a splinter digs into your thigh through your hose. This is the baseline. This is the canvas upon which medieval fun had to be painted. It wasn't about seeking thrills. It was about escaping the crushing weight of the void. You realize that you would do almost anything right now for a distraction. You would watch 2 beetles fight. You would bet your favorite spoon on whether the candle will burn out before the log does. You would listen to a story you've heard 1,000 times just to hear a human voice filling the empty space. The pressure of the boredom builds in your chest. It's a physical sensation, an itch under your skin. You need chaos. You need noise. You need something to happen. And because nothing is happening, you realize you are going to have to make something happen. You look at your neighbor. He looks at you. You both look at a small pile of dried beans sitting on the table. A silent understanding passes between you. It is time to gamble. It is time to invent a game where the rules are made up, the points don't matter, and the stakes are your dignity. Because anything, absolutely anything, is better than staring at the wall for another minute. You have decided that staring at the fire is no longer sufficient stimulation for a human brain, so you seek out the only other source of light and noise in the village, the tavern. You push open the heavy wooden door, and the wall of sound hits you instantly. It is a dense, chaotic roar of laughter, shouting, and the clattering of cups. The air inside is thick enough to chew, a humid fog of wood smoke, roasting meat, unwashed bodies, and the sharp, yeasty tang of ale that has been spilled on the floor every night for the last 50 years. You find a spot at a trestle table. The wood is sticky. It is coated in a layer of residue that acts as a permanent adhesive for your elbows. This is the medieval equivalent of a sticky pub floor, but instead of spilled soda, it is a patina of rendered animal fat and spilled mead. You don't mind. You are here for action. You are here to gamble. In the center of the table, illuminated by a tallow candle that is dripping hot grease onto the playing surface, is the game. It is called Hazard. If the name sounds ominous, that is because it is. Hazard is the medieval ancestor of the modern casino game craps, but with rules so convoluted they require a degree in mathematics to fully understand and a degree in street fighting to enforce. Mainstream historical fact. Dice games were the most popular form of gambling in the Middle Ages across all social classes. From kings in their tents during the Crusades to peasants in the mud, everyone threw dice. The church frequently condemned it, calling dice the prayer beads of the devil, but archaeological finds suggest that no one listened. Dice have been found in castles, monasteries, and even buried under church floorboards. Your opponent is a man named Watt. Watt has a scar running through his eyebrow and a grin that suggests he knows something you don't. He holds out a hand, and in his palm rest the tools of your potential destruction. 2 small off-white cubes. These are not the precision-engineered plastic dice of the modern world. These are astragali, or knuckle bones. Specifically, they are carved from the talus bone of a sheep or goat. They are roughly cubic, but they retain the organic memory of the animal they came from. They are slightly uneven, pitted, and stained yellow from years of handling by greasy fingers. Because they aren't perfectly balanced, they have favored sides. A seasoned player knows which way a specific bone likes to fall. Watt looks like a seasoned player. You put a coin on the table. It is a silver penny, a day's wages. Watt matches it. The game begins. Hazard involves a caster, you, calling a number between 5 and 9. This is the main. You roll. If you roll the main, you win. If you roll a 2 or a 3, you lose. If you roll an 11 or 12, it depends on what the main was. If you roll anything else, that number becomes the chance, and you have to keep rolling until you hit the chance again, win, or the main again, lose. If you are confused, don't worry. You are supposed to be. The confusion is part of the thrill. It allows for arguments, for side bets, and for the gradual draining of your purse while you try to figure out if rolling a 7 is good or bad in this specific round. You call 7. You throw the bones. They rattle across the wood with a hollow, skittering sound, clack, 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 and come to rest against a discarded crust of bread. A 4 and a 2. 6. That is your chance. Now you must roll a 6 before you roll a 7. The table leans in. The smell of onions and damp wool intensifies. You shake the bones again. Clack. 5. Clack. 9. Clack. 7. Out! Watt shouts, sweeping the pennies into his pouch with a speed that suggests he has practiced this motion 1,000 times. You feel the sting of loss. It isn't just the money, it is the indignity. But the night is young, and the boredom is still waiting outside in the dark. You cannot leave on a loss. That is the gambler's fallacy, alive and well in the 13th century. You dig into your pouch. You have one more penny. You slam it down. Again, you say. This time, you watch Watt's hands. There is a quirky fringe tidbit about medieval gambling that you remember hearing. Cheating was rampant and incredibly sophisticated. Some dice were loaded by drilling a hole, filling it with quicksilver, mercury, and plugging it with wax. The heavy liquid would shift, forcing the die to land on a specific side. Others were bristled, fitted with a tiny, invisible hog's hair that would catch on the rough table surface and prevent the die from rolling over. You stare at the bones in Watt's hand. Are they loaded, bristled, or shaved, where one side is filed down slightly to change the probability? You can't accuse him. Accusing a man of cheating in a tavern usually leads to a trial by combat, which in this setting means getting hit in the head with a pewter tankard. You play again, you lose again. The penny joins its brother in Watt's pouch. Now you are broke. But the adrenaline is pumping. The demon of the dice has you. You look down at your feet. You are wearing a pair of leather turn shoes, simple ankle-high boots stitched inside out and then turned. They are worn, scuffed, and molded to your feet, but they are valuable. Leather is expensive. The shoes, you say, lifting a foot onto the bench. Watt raises an eyebrow. He looks at your shoes. He looks at his own shoes, which are currently held together with twine. He nods. He puts 3 pennies on the table. It's a low valuation, but you are desperate. You take off your shoes. The cold air of the tavern hits your wool-stockinged feet instantly. You feel vulnerable. You are literally betting your ability to walk home comfortably. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of medieval sumptuary laws and gambling bans. Kings and bishops constantly issued decrees forbidding dice games, threatening excommunication or fines. The frequency of these laws, reissued decade after decade, suggests they were completely ignored. It seems that no amount of royal parchment could stop a peasant from betting his footwear on a pair of sheep bones. You take the dice, they feel heavy, cold, and malicious. You cup them in your hands, blowing on them for luck, a tradition that goes back to the Romans. You whisper a prayer to Saint Cayetano, the patron saint of gamblers, although you're pretty sure he's busy helping someone who isn't betting their shoes. Main is 5, you announce, a risky call. You throw. The dice tumble. They spin. One settles on a 3. The other spins on its corner and lands on a 1. 4. Crabs! Someone yells. In hazard, rolling a 4 when the main is 5 is an instant loss. It is the worst possible outcome. Watt doesn't even smile. He just reaches out and takes the shoes. He ties the laces together and slings them over his shoulder like a trophy. You sit there, stunned. You are penniless. You are shoeless. You are sitting in a room full of strangers who have just witnessed your financial ruin via sheep anatomy. And yet, weirdly, you aren't bored anymore. You feel alive. Terrible, cold, and foolish, but alive. The tavern keeper, a large man with an apron that hasn't been washed since the last crusade, looks at you. You buying anything else? He asks. You shake your head. You can't buy anything. You are liquidating assets just to exist. You stand up. The floor is damp. You can feel the cold seeping through your stockings. You have to walk home. It is freezing outside. The mud will be icy. You have made a series of terrible life choices that have led you to this moment. Standing barefoot in a tavern, defeated by a piece of a goat's leg. But as you turn to leave, you hear the clack, clack, clack start up again behind you. Another soul has sat down. Another penny has hit the wood. The game continues. It is the eternal engine of distraction, grinding up wages and dignity to produce a few sparks of excitement in the long, dark night. You step out into the cold. The mud squelches between your toes. It is unpleasant. It is freezing, but at least you have a story. And in the medieval world, a story is sometimes the only currency that doesn't depreciate. You start the long, cold limp home, already planning how to win your shoes back tomorrow. Maybe if you bet your tunic. You are now penniless and shoeless, shivering in your stockings on the damp earth floor. The adrenaline of the dice game has faded, replaced by a cold, gnawing realization that the walk home is going to be excruciating. But you cannot leave yet. To leave now would be to admit total defeat. You need a victory, even a small one, to salvage your dignity before you face the frost. You look for a distraction that doesn't involve money. You slide down the bench to a quieter spot near the hearth, where the firelight casts long, flickering shadows. There, carved directly into the wood of the table, is a series of lines. 3 concentric squares connected by bisecting lines at the midpoints. It looks like a blueprint for a fortress, or perhaps a trap. It is a board for 9 men's Morris, or midrolls. It is the game of kings, monks, and bored peasants alike. It requires no dice, no luck, and no money. It requires only a handful of pebbles and a brain capable of seeing 3 moves ahead. Your opponent this time is an old shepherd named Cedric. He smells of lanolin and wood smoke, and he has a face like a dried apple. He doesn't speak. He just pushes a small pile of white stones toward you. He keeps the black stones, small, smooth river rocks, for himself. You accept the challenge. You place your first stone on a corner point. Cedric places his on a midpoint. The game has begun. 9 Men's Morris is a deceptively simple game. The goal is to form a mill, 3 of your pieces in a row along one of the lines. If you form a mill, you get to remove one of your opponent's pieces from the board. It sounds easy. It is not. It is a brutal, grinding exercise in positional warfare. Mainstream historical fact: 9 Men's. Morris is one of the oldest board games in history. Boards have been found carved into the temple roofs of ancient Egypt, the steps of Roman basilicas, and even the deck planks of the Gokstad Viking ship. It was the universal time killer of the ancient and medieval world, a game that transcended language and borders. The first phase of the game is simply placing your pieces. Plonk, plonk, plonk. It feels rhythmic, almost soothing. You build a wall. Cedric blocks it. You try to set up a double threat. Cedric sees it and places a stone right in the intersection, ruining your plan. He is annoying. Once all 18 stones are on the board, the real torture begins. Now you must slide your pieces along the lines to adjacent empty spots. The board is crowded. Every move feels claustrophobic. You slide a stone to the left, hoping to open up a line. Cedric immediately slides his stone into the gap you just vacated, locking you in. This is the essence of Morris. It is not a game of grand sweeping attacks. It is a game of suffocation. You are trying to restrict your opponent's movement until they have nowhere to go, strangling their options until they are forced to make a mistake. You stare at the grid. The lines seem to vibrate in the candlelight. You realize that you have played this game 1,000 times before, and yet every game feels exactly the same. It is a loop, a geometric prison. There is a quirky fringe tidbit about this game. Medieval people were so obsessed with it that they carved boards into places they definitely shouldn't have. Archaeologists have found Morris boards scratched into the stone seats of cathedral cloisters and the benches of monks' stalls. This implies that even during holy services, while chanting the Psalms, monks were secretly playing strategy games with hidden pebbles, engaging in silent mental combat while pretending to pray. You are currently praying for Cedric to make a mistake. He doesn't. He moves his stone with agonizing slowness, his thick finger pushing the rock a single inch. Scritch. The sound of stone on wood is grating. You manage to form a mill, 3 white stones in a row. A surge of triumph rushes through you. Take that, you think. You reach out and remove one of Cedric's black stones from the board. Ideally, you want to take a piece that is part of his own potential mill. You grab a key defender. Cedric's expression does not change. He simply moves another stone, forming a mill of his own that you hadn't even noticed. He takes one of yours. You are back where you started, just with fewer pieces. The game drags on. The tavern noise fades into a background hum. Your world narrows down to the grid. You start to see patterns in the wood grain. You start to wonder if the squares are shrinking. This is the danger of Morris. It induces a kind of trance, a paralysis of analysis, where you stare at the board until your eyes cross, terrified that moving a single pebble will bring your entire defense crashing down. Historians still argue about the symbolic meaning of the game. Some scholars suggest that the three squares represented the sacred geometry of the cosmos, the earth, the heavens, and the underworld, and that playing the game was a ritual act of ordering the universe. Others argue that it was just a really good way to waste time when it was raining. Right now, as you shiver in your stockings, you are leaning heavily toward the wasting time theory. You are down to 3 pieces. This triggers the final phase of the game, flying. When a player has only 3 stones left, they are no longer restricted to sliding along the lines. They can fly their piece to any empty spot on the board. Suddenly, the game changes from a claustrophobic wrestling match to a chaotic teleportation battle. Cedric's stone hops from the inner square to the outer corner. Your stone jumps to the middle. It is frantic. It is desperate. You are chasing each other around the board, trying to form one last mill before you are reduced to 2 pieces and lose instantly. But Cedric is too good. He flies his stone into a corner, blocking your line. You are trapped. You can't move. Stalemate, you offer, hopeful. Cedric shakes his head. He points to an empty spot. You have to move there. It is the only legal move. You slide your stone. Cedric slides his. Mill. He removes your 3rd piece. You have lost. You stare at the board. The empty grid mocks you. You have lost your shoes, your penny, and now your intellectual pride. You have been bested by a man who probably thinks the world is flat and held up by 4 giant turnips. You sweep the stones off the table. They clatter onto the floor, mixing with the rush and the dirt. You don't bother to pick them up. Let the next victim find them. The tavern keeper is starting to put out the candles. The fire is dying down to embers. The darkness is reclaiming the room. You realize with a sinking heart that you have run out of distractions. There are no more games to play. There is only the cold, the dark, and the long walk home. You stand up, your feet numb. You nod to Cedric, who is already setting up the board for a game against himself. He is a machine, a Morris playing automaton fueled by silence and sheep. You push open the door and step out into the night. The cold hits you like a physical blow. The mud is freezing, oozing between your toes. It is a sensation you will remember for the rest of your life, or at least until the frostbite sets in. But as you trudge through the dark, a thought occurs to you. You didn't win, but for an hour you weren't cold, you weren't bored. You were a general commanding an army of white pebbles. You were a master of geometry. You were alive. And tomorrow is Shrove Tuesday, and that means mob football. You crack a smile in the dark. You might not have shoes, but tomorrow you are going to tackle the miller's son into a ditch. And that, my friend, is something to look forward to. You wake up the next morning feeling stiff, cold, and regretting the loss of your shoes, but there is a buzz in the air that cuts through the winter gloom. Today is Shrove Tuesday. In the church calendar, it is the last day before the somber fasting of Lent begins. It is a day for confessing sins, eating pancakes to use up the last of the eggs and fat, and, most importantly, engaging in sanctioned violence. You step outside. The village is already awake. People are gathering in the central square, but they aren't carrying tools or baskets. They are empty-handed, stretching their limbs, eyeing their neighbors with a mix of camaraderie and murderous intent. Today is the day of the mob football match. You might think you know football or soccer, depending on your longitude. You imagine a neatly marked pitch, 11 players per side, a referee with a whistle, and a set of rules governing fouls and offsides. Forget all of that. Medieval mob football is not a sport. It is a riot with a vague objective. The pitch is the entire world between two landmarks, usually the church porch of your village and the mill of the neighboring village, which could be 3 miles away. The teams are everyone, literally everyone. The men of your village versus the men of the next village. Hundreds of people on each side. There are no positions. There is no strategy. There is only the mob. And the ball? It's a pig's bladder, inflated, tied off with twine, and sometimes encased in leather if the local cobbler was feeling generous. It is light, bouncy, and surprisingly durable, which is good, because it is about to be crushed under the weight of 600 peasants. The game begins not with a whistle, but with a shout. Someone tosses the bladder into the air in the neutral ground between the villages. For a split second, it hangs there, a pale orb against the gray sky. Then, the two human waves crash together. The sound is sickening, a wet thud of bodies impacting bodies, followed by the collective grunt of 200 men losing their wind simultaneously. You are in the thick of it immediately. You don't see the ball, you don't even look for the ball, you just push. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval mob football, also known as folk football or Shrovetide football, had almost no rules. The only generally accepted prohibition was against murder, strictly defined as intentional killing with a weapon, and sometimes against hiding the ball in a bag or transporting it by horse. Everything else, punching, kicking, tripping, wrestling, dragging someone through a hedge backwards, was fair game. It was so violent that kings repeatedly tried to ban it. Edward II famously issued a proclamation in 1314 forbidding hustling over large balls due to the noise and potential for unrest. You feel an elbow in your ribs. You shove back, you grab the tunic of the man in front of you. It's the miller's son, the one you swore vengeance on last night, and you haul him backward into the mud. He goes down with a splash. You scramble over him, using his back as a stepping stone. This is justice. This is sport. The mob surges forward, then backward, then sideways. It is a fluid, chaotic organism. Sometimes the ball disappears for 20 minutes, trapped at the bottom of a scrum that is really just a pile of groaning men. You can't see it, but you can smell the sweat and the desperation. The terrain is a nightmare. You aren't playing on grass. You are playing through the landscape as it exists. You crash through bramble hedges, tearing your clothes and skin. You splash through icy streams, the water numbing your legs. You trample through freshly plowed fields, ruining the winter wheat, much to the despair of the local lord. If a house is in the way, the mob goes around it, or sometimes through it. There are records of football games destroying fences, garden walls, and even barns. Historians still argue about the origins of these games. Some claim they are pagan rituals meant to celebrate the return of the sun, the ball, or to ensure fertility for the crops by trampling the fields. Others suggest a grim military origin, theorizing that the first balls were actually the severed heads of defeated Vikings or Romans, kicked around in triumph. While the severed head theory is likely a myth, looking at the ferocity around you, it feels plausible. You finally spot the ball. It pops out of the crush like a cork from a bottle, arching high into the air. A roar goes up. "To the mill! To the mill!" But the mill. You sprint. Your shoeless feet slap against the half-frozen mud. You don't feel the cold anymore. You are running on pure adrenaline and mob mentality. You see a man from the rival village, a big blacksmith with arms like tree trunks, reaching for the ball. You don't think, you act. You launch yourself at his knees. It's a perfect tackle. He goes down like a felled oak. You scramble for the bladder. It is slippery, covered in mud and spit. You grab it. For a glorious, fleeting second, you have it. You are the hero. You are the king of Shrove Tuesday. Then 3 people land on top of you. The world goes dark. You are pressed into the mud. You can't breathe. There is a knee in your back and a hand on your face. You try to curl into a ball to protect your ribs. The bladder is ripped from your grasp. The weight lifts as the mob moves on, chasing the prize, leaving you gasping in the dirt. You sit up, spitting out mud. Your nose is bleeding. Your tunic is torn. You have lost the ball, but you are laughing. It is a wild, breathless laugh that hurts your chest. This is the release valve of medieval society. For 364 days a year, you are a serf. You bow to the Lord, you pay your taxes, you follow the rules. But today you can tackle the blacksmith. Today you can scream until your throat is raw. Today, the hierarchy dissolves into a muddy free-for-all where the only thing that matters is strength and spirit. There is a quirky fringe tidbit about the aftermath of these games. They often ended in legal disputes, but not the kind you'd expect. Villages would sue each other for loss of dignity or excessive drowning of players. In one recorded instance, a player drowned because the scrum moved into a river and nobody noticed he was under the water until the ball moved on. It was a tragedy, but the game continued the next year. It always continued. You stagger to your feet. The mob is now half a mile away, a roaring beast moving toward the river. You limp after them. You aren't done yet. The game doesn't end until the ball touches the millstone or the sun goes down, and there are still hours of daylight left. You rejoin the fray near the bridge. The strategy here is simple. Throw the opponents off the bridge. Splash, splash, splash. It is brutal slapstick. You see your neighbor, Watt, the one who won your shoes, get tossed over the railing. He lands in the icy water with a yelp. You feel a deep, warm sense of satisfaction. Karma has arrived, and it is wet. By the time the sun sets, you are bruised, battered, and utterly exhausted. Your village didn't win. The ball eventually disappeared into the woods and was declared a draw, but it doesn't matter. The energy has been spent. The aggression has been exercised. You walk home, arm in arm with the miller's son, the same man you tackled earlier. You are both limping. You are both covered in mud. But there is a bond now, forged in the chaos of the scrum. You have survived the mob. You have earned your pancakes. And as you collapse onto your straw pallet that night, every muscle aching, you think that maybe, just maybe, boredom isn't the worst thing in the world. Because the alternative is being used as a human stepladder by a blacksmith. The bruises from the Shrove Tuesday football riot are slowly turning from a vibrant purple to a dull, aching yellow, but the season has not softened. The winter has deepened. The mud that trapped you yesterday has now frozen solid, transforming the landscape into a hard, unforgiving iron sheet. The marshes, the fens, and the flooded meadows surrounding your village have disappeared under a layer of ice thick enough to hold a cart or a very bored peasant looking for a thrill. You are standing at the edge of the frozen fen. The wind is biting at your exposed ears, but you are not here to fish through the ice or to haul reeds. You are here to fly. In the modern world, ice skating is a graceful affair. We imagine Olympic athletes in sequined costumes performing triple axels, or perhaps families holding hands at Rockefeller Center while holiday music plays softly. Forget all of that. Medieval ice skating is not an art form. It is a desperate, friction-free battle for survival that happens to take place at high speed. You look down at your equipment. You do not have precision-engineered steel blades attached to supportive leather boots. You have bones, specifically the shin bones of a horse, or perhaps the ribs of an ox that you scavenged from the butcher's midden heap last November. You have spent hours preparing them. You boiled them to remove the gristle and marrow, then polished the flat side against a stone until it was as smooth as glass. You drilled holes in the ends using a heated awl, a smelly, unpleasant task, and threaded leather thongs through them. You sit down on the frozen bank and strap the bones to your shoes. You tie them tight, cutting off the circulation to your already numb toes. The bones feel clunky and heavy. They don't have edges. This is the crucial difference. Modern skates bite into the ice, allowing you to push off to the side and turn with precision. Bone skates do not bite. They float. They slide in every direction simultaneously. If you try to push off like a modern skater, your legs will simply fly apart like a pair of scissors, and you will introduce your tailbone to the permafrost. So how do you move? You need a third leg. You pick up your propulsion device, a long, stout wooden pole tipped with an iron spike. It looks like a spear, and given the general vibe of the Middle Ages, it probably doubles as one. Mainstream historical fact. This method of skating, gliding on bones while pushing with a spiked pole, was the standard across Northern Europe for centuries. Archaeological finds of bone skates date back to 3000 BC in Finland, suggesting that before humans invented the wheel, they figured out how to strap skeletons to their feet to cross frozen lakes. It wasn't originally a sport, it was a transit system. Why trudge around a frozen swamp for 3 hours when you can slide across it in 20 minutes? You stand up. The world instantly becomes unstable. Your feet slide forward, backward, and sideways all at once. You plant the iron spike between your feet, anchoring yourself. You take a breath. The air is so cold it tastes like metal. You push. The spike bites into the ice. Your arms tense, and you shoot forward. The sensation is exhilarating and terrifying because the bones are greased with animal fat and polished smooth. There is almost no friction. You are moving faster than a man can run, gliding silently over the black ice. You get into a rhythm. Plant, push, glide, plant, push, glide. It is less like skating and more like cross-country skiing, or perhaps punting a boat across a frozen river. You are a human sled. The wind rushes past your face, making your eyes water. You pick up speed. The bank of the fen blurs. For a moment, you aren't a surf. You aren't hungry. You are a projectile. But you are not alone. The ice is crowded. The youth of the village are out in force, and they have turned the frozen marsh into a chaotic playground. Some are sliding in long chains, holding onto each other's belts. Others are being pulled by friends running on the banks with ropes. And then there are the jousters. You see two young men speeding toward each other from opposite ends of the ice. They are moving fast, poles held high. They aren't trying to avoid a collision, they are aiming for it. This is the medieval sport of tilting on the ice. It is exactly what it sounds like. They charge. They raise their poles, not the sharp ends, thankfully, but the blunt handles, and they strike. Ideally, they hit each other's shields, if they have them, or chests. The impact is loud. Thwack. One skater keeps his balance. The other spins out of control, his bone skates losing all traction. He goes down hard, sliding another 20 feet on his back, spinning like a top. The crowd on the bank cheers. There is a quirky fringe tidbit from the 12th century writer William Fitzstephen, who described the winter sports of London. He wrote about young men who placed the leg bones of animals under the soles of their feet and strike each other with poles. He noted, with grim medieval practicality, that often the skater hits his head against the ice and the skin is peeled off. He also mentioned broken arms and legs were common. It was basically a demolition derby on ice. You steer clear of the jousters. You aren't looking for a concussion today. You are looking for flow. You push harder. You are flying toward the center of the fen, where the ice is clear and deep. You look down. The ice is dark, almost black, but you can see bubbles of methane trapped beneath the surface, white suspended pearls. You wonder if there are fish down there, sleeping in the mud, waiting for spring. Historians still argue about whether bone skating in the Middle Ages was primarily a utilitarian mode of travel or purely a recreational activity. The sheer number of skates found in urban centers like York and London suggests it was a popular pastime for the youth, a way to burn off energy when the fields were frozen. But for a shepherd in the fens, it might have been the only way to check on a distant flock without sinking into a bog. You try to turn. This is the hardest part. You can't lean into the turn like a modern skater. You have to use the pole to steer, dragging it like a rudder. You dig the iron tip in to the left. Your body pivots, the bone skates skitter sideways, chattering against the rougher ice. You wobble, your arms windmill. You regain your balance just in time. It is a full-body workout. Your shoulders burn from pushing. Your core is tight from balancing. Your ankles ream against the leather thongs, but you don't stop. You can't stop. To stop is to freeze. You see a patch of rough ice ahead, frozen ripples where the wind caught the water as it set. You brace yourself. You hit the patch. The bones rattle violently. Your teeth clack together. You feel every bump travel straight up your shin bone into your knee. Then, disaster. Your left pole slips. You lose your anchor. Your feet shoot out from under you as if pulled by an invisible rope. You are airborne. For a split second, you are suspended in the gray winter sky. Then gravity remembers you. You hit the ice with your hip. The air leaves your lungs in a sharp whoosh. You slide, spinning, watching the sky rotate above you. You come to a stop near a clump of frozen reeds. You lie there for a moment, checking your systems. Nothing seems broken, just bruised. You are adding to your collection of Shrove Tuesday injuries. You sit up. The ice is cold through your tunic. You check your skates. One of the leather thongs has snapped. The horse bone is dangling from your foot. Your skating session is over. You unstrap the bones. They are warm from the friction, a strange ghostly heat. You pick them up. They are polished even smoother now. You use your pole as a walking stick to hobble back to the shore. The sun is dipping low again. The cold is returning with a vengeance. You watch the other skaters, dark silhouettes gliding against the pale ice. It looks beautiful from a distance, silent, graceful, effortless. But you know the truth, you know the grit, the noise, and the constant threat of falling. You reach the bank. You put your turn shoes back on. The leather feels soft and safe compared to the bone. You look back at the fen. You didn't get where you were going, mostly because you weren't going anywhere. But for an hour, you weren't just a peasant stuck in the mud. You were swift. You were dangerous. You were faster than a horse. You turn toward home. The fire will need building up. The pottage will need stirring. The boredom will be waiting for you in the shadows of the hut. But tonight, you have a new story and a new bruise, and in the dead of winter, feeling anything, even pain, is better than feeling nothing at all. The ice has finally melted, retreating into the black soil of the fens, and the bone skates have been hung up in the rafters to dry and grow brittle until next year. The world has thawed, and with the mud comes a new kind of visitor. You are standing on the village green. The grass is long, vibrant, and wet. The air smells of wet earth and hawthorn blossoms. It is spring, or perhaps early summer, the season when the roads become passable again and the world opens up just enough to let strangers in. And today, a stranger has arrived. He is a jongleur, a traveling entertainer who walks the line between artist and vagrant. He wears a tunic that is a patchwork of bright, clashing colors. Red next to yellow, green next to purple, and a hat with bells that jingle softly every time he moves his head. He stands on a small wooden crate to give himself some height, but he is not the star of the show. The star is a pig. The pig is tied to the crate with a length of rope. It is a large pinkish-gray beast with coarse bristles and an expression of profound indifference. It is wearing a small, comical ruff around its neck, which is already stained with mud. This, you are told, is Toby the Learned Pig, a creature of such intellect that he has performed before counts and bishops. You are skeptical. You know pigs. You live with pigs. You ate a relative of this pig for dinner last Tuesday. But boredom is a powerful motivator, and you have nothing else to do until the cows come home. So you watch. The jongleur begins his act. He juggles 3 wooden balls. It is fine. He drops one, recovers quickly with a joke about gravity being a harsh mistress, and keeps going. He swallows a small flame from a torch, singeing his mustache in the process. The crowd, mostly children and idle farmhands, claps politely. They have seen fire before. They want the pig. Mainstream historical fact. Traveling entertainers were the internet of the medieval world. They were the primary source of secular entertainment, news, and gossip for the illiterate masses. They traveled constantly, moving from fairs to markets to castle halls, carrying stories and songs across borders. But they were also viewed with deep suspicion. Because they had no fixed home and no master, they were often considered lawless, immoral, and potentially dangerous. To welcome a jongleur was to invite chaos into your village. The jongleur senses the crowd's impatience. He steps down from the crate and bows to the pig. "And now," he booms, his voice projecting across the green, "the marvel of the age, the porcine prodigy, he will now play the drum." He produces a small, battered hand drum and holds it in front of the pig. The pig sniffs it. The pig licks it. The pig looks at the crowd, then back at the drum. The tension is palpable. Will he do it? Is this pig actually musical? The jongleur subtly nudges the pig with his foot. The pig grunts, lifts a trotter, and smacks the drum. Thud. The crowd goes wild. It is the single greatest thing you have seen in 6 months. The pig hits it again. Thud. Then he loses interest and tries to eat the jongleur's shoe. This is the height of medieval comedy. It is absurd, it is low stakes, and it involves livestock behaving like people. You find yourself laughing, a genuine belly laugh that hurts your ribs. There is something inherently funny about a pig with a job. There is a quirky fringe tidbit about medieval animal acts. They were incredibly common and strangely specific. While dancing bears were popular, musical pigs were a recurring motif in medieval art. You can find carvings in churches, known as misericords, that depict pigs playing bagpipes, harps, and organs. It seems that for hundreds of years, the funniest joke in Europe was, what if a pig started a band? The act continues. The jongleur tries to get the pig to dance. This mostly involves the jongleur playing a frantic tune on a pipe while pulling the pig's rope so it stumbles in a circle. The pig squeals. The bells on the jongleur's hat jingle. It is a cacophony of indignity. You watch the pig's eyes. They are soulful, intelligent, and filled with a deep, existential weariness. You realize that you and the pig have a lot in common. You both work for food, you both live in mud, and you are both currently participating in a farce just to get through the day. Historians still argue about the social status of these performers. Were they respected artists keeping oral traditions alive, or were they social pariahs, essentially beggars with a gimmick? The church certainly hated them. Clerics frequently preached against histriones, actors, and joculatores, claiming they were ministers of Satan who distracted the faithful from prayer. But looking around the green, you don't see anyone being corrupted. You just see people forgetting their toothaches for 10 minutes. The finale approaches. The jongleur claims the pig can count. He holds up 3 fingers. Toby, how many fingers? The pig stares at him. The jongleur reaches into his pocket and pulls out a piece of apple. He holds it behind his back. The pig paws the ground 3 times. A miracle, the jongleur shouts. You know the pig is just pawing for the apple. Everyone knows. But you clap anyway. You clap because the apple is gone. The pig is chewing, and the illusion is complete. For a moment, the world is magical. Pigs can count. Men can swallow fire. And you are not just a serf standing in the wet grass. You are an audience member at a grand performance. The jongleur passes his hat around. It is a greasy felt cap. You dig into your pouch. You don't have much. You lost your shoes at dice, remember? But you find a halfpenny. You toss it in. It lands with a soft thud on top of a few other copper coins. The jongleur nods at you. He looks tired. Up close, you can see the lines around his eyes, the gray in his beard. His bright tunic is patched and repatched. The pig leans against his leg, heavy and solid. They are a team, bound together by the road and the rope. He packs up his crate. He unties the pig. He shoulders his pack, which rattles with the tools of his trade, wooden balls, knives, the drum. He walks away down the muddy track, the pig trotting obediently behind him, the bells on his hat fading into the distance. You watch them go until they disappear around the bend in the road. The silence returns to the village green. The crows settle back into the trees. The cows resume their chewing. The magic is gone. You feel a sudden, sharp pang of melancholy. It is the post-circus blues medieval edition. The entertainment highlighted just how quiet your normal life is. You have to go back to the hut. You have to go back to the loom, the plow, the pottage. But you have a new story now. Tonight, by the fire, you will tell your family about the pig. You will exaggerate. You will say the pig played a complex rhythm. You will say it danced on two legs. You will say it counted to 10. And they will listen, eyes wide, because in a world without screens, a story about a talented pig is a blockbuster movie. You turn back toward your home. The sun is warm on your face. The mud is drying. You are bored again, yes. But it is a lighter boredom now. A boredom tinged with the memory of a drumbeat and a squeal. And tomorrow is the Feast of Fools. And if you thought a pig playing a drum was chaotic, you haven't seen the local priest wearing his vestments inside out and singing bawdy songs in the choir loft. You smile. The Middle Ages might be hard, but they are certainly never dull for long. Time has jumped forward, sliding across the calendar from the green grass of spring back into the iron grip of winter. It is the 1st of January, the feast of the circumcision, but inside the great stone cathedral of the nearest city, nobody is thinking about theology. You have traveled here to escape the crushing silence of your village, hoping for a solemn mass to start the new year. What you find instead looks like a collective hallucination. You push open the heavy oak doors, expecting the scent of frankincense and the sound of Gregorian chant. Instead, you are hit by a wall of noise that sounds like a barnyard exploding inside a library. The air is thick, but not with holy smoke. It smells of roasting meat, cheap wine, and, is that burning leather? Welcome to the Feast of Fools. This is the one day of the year when the strict, rigid hierarchy of the medieval church is deliberately, violently, and joyfully inverted. It is the Festum Fatuorum, a sanctioned riot where the lowliest subdeacons, the clerks, and the choir boys take over the roles of the bishops and high priests. And they aren't just reading the lines, they are mocking the entire system. You stand by a pillar, trying to make sense of the scene. In the choir stalls, where usually somber monks stand with heads bowed, you see a row of men wearing their vestments inside out. Some are wearing masks, grotesque painted faces of monsters, or animal heads made of papier-mâché. One man is wearing a bishop's mitre, but he has wearing it backward, and you are reasonably certain he is actually the guy who sweeps the vestry floors. Mainstream historical fact. The Feast of Fools was a very real, very popular tradition in France and England throughout the High Middle Ages. It was rooted in a verse from the Magnificat. Deposuit potentes de sede et exaltavit humiles. He has put down the mighty from their seats and exalted them of low degree. The lower clergy took this literally. For one day, the people at the bottom got to play boss, and the people at the top had to sit there and take it. The Bishop of Fools stands at the high altar. He is holding a crozier, the shepherd's stove of office, but instead of blessing the congregation, he is waving a sausage. He takes a bite, chews theatrically, and then blesses the crowd with the half-eaten pork link. The congregation roars with laughter. This isn't a protest. It's a safety valve. Medieval society was a pressure cooker of rules. You couldn't wear certain clothes. You couldn't eat meat on Fridays. You couldn't question the king. If the pressure built up too high, the whole thing would explode in a bloody peasant revolt. So the church, in its infinite wisdom, or perhaps desperation, allowed the lid to be cracked open once a year. They let the chaos out in a controlled burst so that tomorrow everyone could go back to being obedient. You watch as a procession winds its way down the nave. It is a parody of a holy procession. Instead of swinging censers filled with sweet incense, the participants are swinging old shoes filled with smoldering dung. This is a quirky fringe tidbit that appears in several condemnations of the festival. The incense used during the Feast of Fools was often specifically pudding and sausages, or old shoes. The smell of burning leather and feces wafts toward you. It is acrid and foul, stinging your eyes. The faux priests cough and gag, exaggerating their discomfort for comedic effect. It is slapstick comedy performed in the holiest place on earth. Historians still argue vigorously about the true nature of this festival. Was it, as the functionalist anthropologists argue, a necessary mechanism for social stability, a way to reinforce the order by briefly mocking it? Or was it, as later church reformers insisted, a genuine act of blasphemy that eroded the authority of the church? Given that it was eventually banned with extreme prejudice by the Council of Basel in 1431, the church eventually decided it was the latter. But right now, in the 13th century, it is just a really good time. You see a group of deacons sitting right on the altar steps, playing dice. They are shouting, cursing, and gambling right next to the holy relics. It is shocking. It feels dangerous. You keep waiting for a lightning bolt to strike the roof, but none comes. God, apparently, has a sense of humor today. Or perhaps he is just looking the other way. The bishop begins a sermon. It is nonsense. He is speaking in a mix of Latin and gibberish, making high-pitched squealing noises in between sentences. He commands the congregation to drink more ale, to eat more fat, and to ignore their chores. It is the anti-sermon. It tells you to indulge in everything you are usually told to resist. You find yourself laughing. It is infectious. The sheer absurdity of seeing the solemn, terrifying machinery of the church turned into a farce is deeply cathartic. For a year, these stone walls have represented judgment, tithes, and the fear of hell. Today, they represent a joke. It makes the institution feel smaller, less crushing. Someone hands you a piece of black pudding. You don't ask where it came from. You eat it. It is greasy and rich. You are eating sausages in a cathedral while a man in a donkey mask sings a bawdy song from the pulpit. It is the most surreal moment of your life. But there is an edge to it. You look at the faces of the real bishop and the senior clergy who are sitting in the back, watching. Their smiles are thin, their eyes are cold. They are tolerating this because they have to, but you can see the tension in their jaws. They know that this upside-down world is a fragile fiction. If it goes on too long, or if the mockery cuts too deep, the illusion of their power might shatter for real. The Feast of Fools is a tightrope walk. It is funny because it is dangerous. It is fun because it is forbidden. As evening approaches, the energy shifts. The laughter becomes more raucous, more aggressive. The wine has been flowing for hours. The censer of burning shoes has filled the nave with a choking smog. A fight breaks out near the font between two men arguing over a game of cards. You decide it is time to leave. The release valve has done its job. The pressure is gone, replaced by a headache and the lingering scent of burnt footwear. You slip out the side door, back into the cold, clean air of the winter night. The cathedral looms behind you, a dark mountain of stone. Inside, the chaos continues, a muffled roar of shouting and singing. But outside, the world is quiet. The hierarchy is still there. The stars are still in their fixed orbits. The bishop is still the bishop, and you are still a peasant. You walk away, your boots crunching on the frost. You feel lighter, somehow. You have seen the powerful brought low, even if it was just play acting. You have seen that the rules are made by men, and men can be mocked. But the boredom is already creeping back in. The festival is once a year. What about tomorrow? What about next week? You can't wait a whole year for another sausage-based riot. You need something more regular, something with a story. You've heard rumors that the Guild of Weavers is preparing something in the town square. A wagon, a stage, a story from the Bible, but brought to life with costumes, and special effects. A mystery play. You pull your cloak tighter. Tomorrow, you will go see God create the world on a cart. And if you are lucky, maybe Noah will fall off the ark. The hangover from the Feast of Fools has long since faded, and the seasons have turned again. It is now early summer, perhaps the feast of Corpus Christi, and the air in the town is thick with heat, dust, and the smell of several thousand people sweating in close proximity. You are standing in the town square, or perhaps at a designated street corner in York or Chester, waiting for the greatest show on earth, or at least the greatest show in Yorkshire, to roll past you. You are waiting for the mystery plays. In the modern world, if you want to binge watch a series, you sit on a comfortable sofa with snacks. In the medieval world, binge watching means standing on hard cobblestones for 12 consecutive hours while the entire history of the universe, from creation to the Last Judgment, is performed for you on the back of a series of rickety wagons. You have been standing here since dawn. Your legs feel like tree trunks that are slowly turning into stone. You are wedged between a fishmonger who smells like his wares and a wealthy merchant's wife whose massive headdress keeps poking you in the eye. But you cannot leave. If you leave, you lose your spot. And if you lose your spot, you might miss the end of the world. Mainstream historical fact. These massive cycles of plays were produced and funded by the trade guilds of the city. The assignments were often punningly appropriate. The shipwrights, boat builders, would perform Noah's Ark. The goldsmiths might perform the Adoration of the Magi, and the pinners, pin makers, or butchers were often tasked with the crucifixion, presumably because they were comfortable with nails and blood. It was a massive civic undertaking, a mix of religious devotion and aggressive corporate branding. A rumble echoes down the street. The crowd surges forward, pressing you against a wall. The next pageant wagon is arriving. It is a marvel of medieval engineering. A large wooden cart, draped in painted cloths to hide the wheels, topped with a 2-story structure. The bottom level is a dressing room and sometimes hell, and the top level is the stage. It creaks, it groans, and it is pulled by men or horses who look like they would rather be anywhere else. This wagon belongs to the water leaders and drawers of D. The subject? Noah's flood. This is the blockbuster of the cycle. Everyone loves the flood. It has water, it has animals, and most importantly, it has domestic arguments. The play begins. God appears on the upper deck. He is wearing a gilded leather mask and a white robe that looks like it was borrowed from the bishop's laundry line. He declares he is going to destroy the world. The crowd nods respectfully. Then Noah appears. He starts building the ark. But the real star of the show is Mrs. Noah. In the medieval tradition, Noah's wife is not the silent, obedient figure of the Bible. She is a comedic force of nature, a shrewish, stubborn woman who refuses to get on the boat because she wants to finish her spinning and drink ale with her friends. "Row forth, Noah, and get thee gone," she shouts, "for I will not out of this town." The crowd roars with laughter. It is the same kind of laughter you heard at the Feast of Fools, a recognition of the messy, chaotic reality of human relationships projected onto sacred history. You watch as Noah tries to physically drag his wife onto the boat. She slaps him. He complains about his back. It is a sitcom performed on a cart in the middle of a street while the neighbors watch. You are laughing, but you are also squinting. The sun is beating down. You are thirsty. You wish you had brought a hat. Historians still argue vigorously about the logistics of these performances, specifically true processional staging. Did the actors perform the entire play at one station, then stop, pack up, move the wagon down the street to the next station, and do it all again? If there were 48 plays in the York cycle and 12 stations, that means the poor actor playing God had to create the universe 12 times in a single day. Some scholars argue this would have taken over 20 hours, meaning the Last Judgment would have been performed at 4 o'clock a.m. to an audience of stray dogs. Others suggest the wagons moved, but the plays were shorter, or perhaps some stations were skipped. You, standing there with aching feet, suspect the 20 hours theory is correct. It feels like you have been here since Genesis. The wagon lurches into motion again, moving off to the next station. The crowd cheers. But there is a lull before the next one arrives. This is the rhythm of the day. 20 minutes of intense biblical drama, followed by 15 minutes of staring at an empty street while the next cart negotiates a tight corner 3 blocks away. During the break, you overhear a guildmaster complaining about the costs. This is the reality behind the magic. These plays are expensive. There is a quirky fringe tidbit involving the surviving financial records of these guilds, which read like surrealist poetry. You might find an entry like, item, 4 pence for painting hell, or item, 6 pence for a new tale for the devil, or, most alarmingly, item, paid to God, 12 pence, presumably the actor, not a direct wire transfer to the Almighty. It turns the divine into a line item. Salvation costs money, apparently, especially if you want a really convincing hellmouth. Speaking of hellmouths, the next wagon arrives. It is the Draper's pageant, perhaps, or the Mercer's. It features a hellmouth, a giant mechanical pair of jaws built onto the side of the wagon. It is painted red and black with jagged teeth. This is the special effects extravaganza. Smoke billows from the throat of the beast, likely created by burning wet straw or chemicals in a brazier hidden inside. Demons in leather bodysuits with animal heads leap out of the mouth, running into the crowd to poke people with pitchforks. You shrink back. The heat from the fire is intense. The demons are screaming. One of them steals a pie from a spectator. The crowd loves it. This is the secrets, the medieval term for special effects. They had pulleys to lift Jesus into heaven, ascension, trapdoors for sudden disappearances, and bladders of blood for the martyrdoms. It wasn't CGI, but when you are a peasant who has never seen anything more high-tech than a windmill, a mechanical dragon jaw snapping at you is terrifyingly realistic. But as the hours drag on, the novelty wears off. You have seen Cain kill Abel. You have seen Abraham almost kill Isaac. You have seen the Romans kill Jesus. You have seen a lot of killing. The sun begins to dip lower. The shadows of the gabled houses stretch across the square. You are exhausted. Your brain is saturated with theology and slapstick. You feel a strange kind of museum fatigue, but for street theater, you just want the world to end. Literally, you are waiting for the doomsday wagon so you can go home. Finally, as twilight settles, the Mercer's wagon rolls in for the last judgment. It is magnificent. Angels with gold leaf wings, a Jesus on a rainbow, a sturdy piece of painted wood, and the good souls being separated from the bad. You watch as the bad souls, actors in black suits, are dragged into the hellmouth. You feel a twinge of anxiety. You hope you aren't one of them. You promise yourself you will be better. You will pay your tithes. You will stop gambling your shoes away at hazard. The final wagon rumbles away into the dark. The show is over. The crowd begins to disperse, a slow, shuffling mass of tired humanity. You have witnessed the entire span of existence, condensed into a day of shouting men on carts. You walk home. Your feet are throbbing. Your head is spinning. You are spiritually edified, entertained, and physically wrecked. It was a good day. But as you trudge through the darkening streets, you see a couple walking ahead of you, a knight and a lady. He is bowing to her. He is holding her hand as if it were made of glass. He whispers something, and she blushes, turning her face away with a practiced, elegant modesty. You stop. This is new. This isn't the rough and tumble flirting of the tavern. This isn't the bawdy marriage of Noah and his wife. This is something intricate, something refined, something that looks like it requires a rule book just to say hello. You have survived the mud, the riots, and the theatrical endurance test. But you are not prepared for the most exhausting game of all, courtly love. You pull your cloak tighter. Tomorrow, you will try to understand why a knight would wear a lady's sleeve on his helmet, and why staring longingly at a window is considered a productive use of time. You have survived the mud of the football pitch and the endurance test of the mystery plays, and now you find yourself navigating a battlefield far more treacherous, confusing, and likely to result in injury than any riot, the landscape of courtly love. You are standing in a garden. It is a hortus conclusus, an enclosed garden surrounded by high stone walls to keep the wind and the peasants out. It smells of damask roses, lilies, and the intense perfumed anxiety of 20 young men trying desperately to look nonchalant while wearing tights. You are here to woo a lady, but in the Middle Ages, you cannot simply walk up to her and say, "Hello, would you like to get some pottage?" That would be efficient, sensible, and utterly barbaric. No, you must follow the rules of fin amour, fine love, and the rules are so complex they make the tax code look like a nursery rhyme. First, you must identify the object of your affection. The rules state clearly that she must be unattainable. Ideally, she should be of higher social station than you. Even better, she should be married to someone else, preferably your boss, the Lord. This ensures that the relationship remains a pure, agonizing secret filled with spiritual longing rather than actual, practical dating. You spot her. She is sitting on a turf bench, wearing a hennin, a cone-shaped headdress with a veil floating from the top like a ghostly windsock. She looks bored. This is perfect. Her boredom is a canvas for your suffering. Mainstream historical fact. The concept of courtly love was codified in the late 12th century, most famously by Andreas Capellanus in his book De Amore, The Art of Courtly Love. Written possibly at the request of Marie of Champagne, daughter of Eleanor of Aquitaine, it lays out 31 absolute rules for lovers. Rule number 1. Marriage is no real excuse for not loving. Rule number 13. When made public, love rarely endures. Rule number 15. Every lover regularly turns pale in the presence of his beloved. You try to turn pale. It involves holding your breath and thinking about the plague. You hope she notices she is currently looking at a squirrel. Next, you must exhibit the symptoms of lovesickness. In the medieval worldview, love isn't just an emotion, it is a literal disease. Physicians believe that the image of the beloved enters through your eyes, travels to your heart, and overheats your vital spirits, causing a physiological imbalance. You are expected to lose your appetite, sigh uncontrollably, and endure bouts of weeping. You let out a loud, tragic sigh. It sounds a bit like a wheeze. A nearby page boy looks at you with concern. You ignore him. You are suffering for art. You approach the lady, but not too close. You must maintain a respectful distance, roughly the length of a polearm. You drop to one knee. This is dangerous in tight hose, but you commit. You present your token. In a modern romance, you might give flowers or chocolates. In courtly love, the exchange of gifts is a high-stakes diplomatic negotiation. You cannot give something too valuable, or it looks like a bribe. You cannot give something too cheap, or it looks like an insult. You have decided to offer her a poem. You wrote it yourself last night by the light of a dying rushlight. It is terrible. It rhymes heart with start and love with dove. It is full of metaphors about falcons and roses. You are very proud of it. She takes the parchment. She reads it. She doesn't smile. Smiling would be too direct. Instead, she gives you a favor. She hands you a sleeve. Yes, a sleeve. It is a detachable piece of her dress made of embroidered silk. In the Middle Ages, sleeves were often pinned or laced onto the bodice, meaning they could be removed and handed out like business cards. You hold the sleeve. It is warm. It smells of lavender and whatever horse she rode in on. Now, what do you do with it? You can't wear it on your arm. That would be silly. No, the tradition dictates that you must tie it to your helmet or your lance during a tournament. You are essentially agreeing to go into combat with a piece of someone's laundry flapping around your head, blinding you at crucial moments, all to prove your devotion. I shall wear this into the fray, you declaim, trying to sound heroic rather than confused. She nods imperceptibly. The transaction is complete. You have leveled up in the game of love. But it isn't over. Now comes the bureaucracy. If a dispute arises in your courtship, say, she accepts a sleeve return from another knight, or you fail to turn sufficiently pale at dinner, you can't just talk it out. You must take it to court. Not a legal court, but a court of love. There is a quirky fringe tidbit about these courts. Historical accounts describe gatherings of noblewomen who sat as judges to hear cases of romantic disputes. They would issue rulings based on the statutes of de amore. In one famous, possibly fictional case, a court of love presided over by Queen Eleanor herself ruled on the question, can true love exist between married people? The verdict, no, because marriage is a contract of obligation, whereas love must be given freely. Therefore, your wife cannot technically be your lover. It was a ruling that surely made dinner conversations awkward across Europe. Historians still argue vigorously about whether these courts of love actually existed as formal tribunals or if they were merely literary games, elaborate role-playing exercises performed at parties to pass the time. Did knights really submit legal briefs about their heartbreaks? Or was it all just a sophisticated way for bored aristocrats to flirt? Given the medieval love for pageantry and legalism, it is highly likely that even if they were games, they were played with deadly seriousness. You retreat from the garden, clutching the sleeve. You are exhausted. The emotional labor required to maintain this charade is immense. You have to be secretive, yet visible, humble, yet brave, sick, yet strong enough to joust. It is a paradox wrapped in silk. You realize that courtly love is basically a job. It is a non-paying internship in affection. You are constantly on probation, waiting for a performance review from a woman who isn't allowed to make eye contact with you in public. You walk back toward the armory. The sleeve flutters in your hand. You have succeeded in the first phase. You have a token. You have a lady to serve. But now comes the part where you have to actually do something with all this pent-up romantic energy. You have to fight. Because the ultimate expression of courtly love isn't poetry or sighing. It is violence. You must prove your worthiness by knocking other men off horses with a large stick. The lady expects it. The rules demand it. You look at the sleeve again. It is a beautiful piece of embroidery. It is also going to get ruined the moment you enter the melee. For love, you mutter, trying to convince yourself. You are tired. You are emotionally drained. You really just want to go sit in a quiet room and not feel things for a while. But the tournament is tomorrow. The heralds are already setting up the lists. The horses are being shod. You have the favor. Now you need the glory. And glory, unfortunately, involves wearing a heavy metal suit in the middle of summer and waiting for hours to get hit by a lance. You head to the stables. You need to bond with your horse. You need to polish your armor. You need to practice your "I am suffering beautifully" face for the crowd. The game of love is exhausting, but the game of war, that is just sweaty. And tomorrow, you get to do both at the same time. You have survived the chaos of the football pitch and the exhausting diplomatic minefield of courtly love, and now you seek a different kind of noble pursuit. You want something quieter, something that connects you with nature, something that feels refined. So you decide to go hawking. In your mind, hawking is a glamorous sport. You picture yourself galloping across a sun-drenched field on a white charger, a majestic falcon swooping down from the clouds to land gently on your wrist while admirers swoon. In reality, hawking is mostly standing in a wet bush while a bird ignores you. You are standing in a forest clearing. It is raining, not a dramatic storm, just a relentless gray drizzle that soaks into your wool cloak and drips off the end of your nose. You have been standing here for an hour. You cannot move, because if you move, you might startle the quarry. You cannot sit, because the ground is a bog. You are essentially a human tree stump. On your left hand, you wear a thick leather gauntlet. Perched on that gauntlet is a goshawk. She is heavy. She smells of raw meat and damp feathers. She is currently hooded, wearing a tiny, ornate leather cap that covers her eyes to keep her calm. Every few minutes, she shifts her weight, and her talons tighten around your wrist, squeezing through the leather with a pressure that reminds you she is a dinosaur in a feathered coat. This is the reality of medieval falconry. It is 90% waiting, 5% bird maintenance, and 5% sheer, unadulterated violence. Mainstream historical fact. Falconry was strictly codified by social rank. You couldn't just buy any bird you wanted. The Boke of St. Albans, a famous 15th century treatise, lays out the hierarchy. A gerfalcon is for a king, a peregrine for an earl, a saker for a knight, a goshawk for a yeoman, that's you, a kestrel for a knave. If you were caught flying a bird above your station, it wasn't just a fashion faux pas, it was a crime. You are literally holding your social status on your fist. You look at your goshawk. She is a bird of the fist, meaning she hunts by flying directly from your hand rather than stooping from high in the sky like a long-winged falcon. She is efficient, bloody-minded, and moody. Her name is probably something descriptive like gripper or madam. You adjust your arm. Your deltoid muscle is burning. Holding a 2-pound Bertsendershow at a right angle to your body for an afternoon is an isometric workout that would make a modern gym rat weep. But you must hold her steady. If you shake, she gets annoyed, and an annoyed goshawk is a liability. You think back to the training process. This is the part the songs don't tell you about. To man a hawk, to tame her, you had to break her will. And the primary method was sleep deprivation. For the first few days after capturing her, you had to carry her constantly, walking around day and night, keeping her awake until she was so exhausted she accepted you as her perch. It was a battle of endurance. You didn't sleep either. You just walked around your house with a bird, hallucinating from fatigue, whispering sweet nothings to a raptor. There is a quirky fringe tidbit about medieval falconry medicine that haunts you. If a hawk had eye trouble, some manuals recommended blowing crushed glass or sugar into its eyes. If it had a fever, you might feed it the meat of a cat. Medieval veterinary science was just as terrifying as human medicine, just with more feathers. Suddenly, a rustle in the undergrowth, a rabbit. Your heart jumps. This is it, the moment of truth. You reach up with your right hand and pull the braces of the hood. You slide the leather cap off the hawk's head. She blinks. Her eyes are bright orange, intense, and terrifyingly focused. She rouses her feathers, a ripple of movement that shakes water droplets onto your face. She spots the movement in the grass. You thrust your arm forward. Oh, she launches. The force of her takeoff pushes your arm down. She is a blur of gray and white, weaving through the tree trunks with impossible agility. This is why you do it. For this split second, you are not a wet man in a forest. You are part of the sky. You are hunting with borrowed wings. You run after her. You have to. If she catches the rabbit, she will start eating it immediately. If she eats too much, she will become full gorge and refuse to hunt again, or worse, she might just fly away and sit in a tree for 2 days while you stand underneath pleading with a lure made of dead pigeon wings. You splash through the mud, dodging brambles. You hear the jingle of the bells attached to her legs, the bewits. This is how you track her. Jingle, jingle, silence. Silence means she has made contact. You burst through a hedge. There she is. She is on the ground, wings mantling, spread out to hide her prize. She has the rabbit. It is over. You approach slowly. You have to retrieve her without getting footed. You offer her a small piece of meat from your pouch, a trade. She looks at the meat. She looks at the rabbit. She decides the easy snack is better. She steps onto your fist. You tie her jesses, leather straps, back to your glove. You bag the rabbit. You hood the bird. The adrenaline fades. The cold rain returns. You are successful. You have dinner. You have performed the noble art. But as you walk back, arm throbbing, boots squelching, you wonder about the relationship between man and bird. Historians still argue about the emotional bond in medieval falconry. Was it purely utilitarian, a way to get fresh meat, or was it deeply emotional? Surviving letters show lords weeping over the deaths of their favorite birds, burying them with honors. Some knights even took their falcons to church, letting them perch on the altar rail during Mass, much to the annoyance of the priests. It seems that for many the bird was not a tool, but a soulmate, a very grumpy, sharp-clawed soulmate. You look at the hooded figure on your fist. She sits motionless, indifferent to your existence now that she is fed. She tolerates you. She uses you as a mobile tree that provides snacks. And yet, you love her. You respect her wildness. In a world of rules, she is pure instinct. You reach the edge of the woods. The sun is trying to break through the clouds, casting a pale, watery light over the fields. You are tired. You smell like wet dog and dead rabbit. You head toward the manor. You need to dry your clothes. You need to inspect the hawk's talons for mud. You need to feed her again. The work never ends. But as you cross the courtyard, you see something that makes you pause. A woman is sitting on a bench, playing with a small creature on her lap. It isn't a bird. It isn't a dog. It is a squirrel, and it is wearing a silver collar. You stare. You have just spent hours in the rain wrestling a predator that wants to eat your face. And here is someone cuddling a rodent that lives in her sleeve. You feel a twinge of curiosity. Hawking is noble, yes, but it is exhausting. Maybe there is a simpler way to connect with nature. Maybe you should get a pet that doesn't require a leather gauntlet. You walk closer. The squirrel runs up the woman's arm and sits on her shoulder, chattering. It looks soft. It looks dry. Does it bite? You ask. She smiles, nursing a small scratch on her thumb. Only when he loves you, you sigh. Of course. In the Middle Ages, everything bites, but at least the squirrel fits in a pocket. You head to the mews to put your hawk to bed. Tomorrow, you will rest your arm. Tomorrow, you will investigate the strange, chaotic world of medieval pets. Because if you can't be a king with a gerfalcon, maybe you can be a peasant with a squirrel in a hat. You have returned the hawk to her perch, fed and hooded, and you are nursing the scratches on your arm. The romance of falconry has faded somewhat, replaced by a deep appreciation for animals that do not require you to stand in a freezing bush for 4 hours waiting for a pigeon. You want companionship, yes, but you want something portable, something soft, something that doesn't look at you like it's deciding which of your fingers would taste best. You remember the woman in the courtyard. You remember the creature on her shoulder, and you decide, in a moment of whimsical madness, that you are going to get a squirrel. In the modern world, squirrels are park decorations, frantic little acrobats that raid bird feeders and cause minor electrical outages. In the Middle Ages, however, they are the it accessory for the fashionable and the bored. Since you can't have a greyhound, too expensive, or a lapdog, too yappy, the red squirrel, Sciurus vulgaris, is the perfect compromise. It has tufted ears, a bushy tail, and a personality that bounces between cuddly and demonic possession. You acquire your new friend from a forester who found a dray, a nest that had fallen during a storm. He hands you the kit. It is small, warm, and impossibly soft. Its heart is beating against your palm like a trapped moth. You look into its large, liquid eyes and think, this will be easy. You are wrong. The first lesson of squirrel ownership is that you are not a master, you are a tree. To the squirrel, your body is simply a vertical surface to be climbed. It scampers up your leg, its tiny, needle-sharp claws pricking through your woolen hose. It spirals around your torso, runs down your arm, and perches on your head, chattering in triumph. You try to bond with it. You name it. Popular medieval pet names are often descriptive or cutesy. You decide on Ruskin because of his russet fur. You carry him around, but you don't use a cage. Cages are for birds. No, the preferred habitat for a medieval pet squirrel is inside your clothes. You tuck Ruskin into the front of your tunic. He curls up against your chest, seeking warmth. It is undeniably adorable. You feel a surge of affection. You walk around the village with a secret, warm lump in your shirt. Then he wakes up. Having a squirrel inside your clothing is a unique sensory experience. It tickles, it scratches, and occasionally it bites your nipple because it thinks it's a nut. You are walking through the market, trying to look dignified, while your torso undulates as if you are undergoing a very localized exorcism. People stare. You smile tightly and pretend you aren't being groomed by a rodent. Mainstream historical fact: squirrels were incredibly popular pets, particularly for noblewomen and high-ranking clerics. Since bishops often forbade nuns and monks from keeping hunting dogs, too disruptive, or hawks, too violent, the clergy turned to smaller, quieter pets. There are records of bishops strictly reprimanding nuns for bringing their squirrels into the choir stalls during services. Imagine trying to chant the Kyrie while a squirrel is trying to hide an acorn in your veil. You realize quickly that Ruskin needs some hardware. You cannot trust him not to bolt up a real tree the moment you step outside. You need a collar. You visit a leather worker, or perhaps a silversmith if you've had a good harvest. You commission a collar. This isn't a simple strap. It is a piece of jewelry. Medieval pet collars were often elaborate, made of red leather stamped with gold patterns, or silver links fitted with tiny bells. You fasten the collar around Ruskin's neck. It fits perfectly. You attach a long, fine silver chain to it, which you pin to your chest. Now he is tethered. He can run from your shoulder to your wrist, but he cannot escape. The little bells on his collar jingle every time he moves. Ting, ting, ting. It is a cheerful sound at first. By the third hour, it sounds like the tinnitus of insanity. The second lesson of squirrel ownership is that they are hoarders. Ruskin does not eat all the nuts you give him. He eats one, and then he hides the rest. And his preferred hiding spot is your bed. You crawl onto your straw pallet at night, exhausted from the hawking and the football, only to lie directly on a stash of hazelnuts. They are cold, hard, and lumpy. You find walnuts in your shoes. You find dried peas in your pockets. You are basically living in a pantry managed by a creature with a brain the size of a bean. But you love him. You feed him scraps of bread soaked in milk. You crack walnuts for him. You let him sleep on your pillow, his tail draped over your nose like a furry mustache. There is a quirky fringe tidbit about the iconography of squirrels in medieval art. They appear frequently in the margins of manuscripts, often being shot by monkeys or knights, but they also appear in portraits of women. In these contexts, the squirrel is often interpreted by art historians as a symbol of, well, lust. The way the squirrel cracks a nut was seen as a visual pun for the sexual act, and the fact that they were kept in the lap or in the bosom added to the risque symbolism. You look at Ruskin, who is currently trying to stuff an entire crust of bread into his mouth sideways. He doesn't look like a symbol of lust. He looks like a chaotic potato. Historians still argue about the nature of the human-animal bond in the Middle Ages. Was it purely utilitarian? Were animals just tools? The existence of pet squirrels suggests otherwise. You don't keep a squirrel for meat, too small, or for work, too chaotic. You keep it because it brings joy. You keep it because in a life that is often hard and gray, a small, bright-eyed thing that sits on your hand and eats a nut is a reminder of gentleness. But the idol cannot last. Ruskin is wild. One afternoon, you are sitting by the fire, dozing. Ruskin is on his chain, perched on the back of your chair. A log shifts in the fire with a loud crack. Ruskin panics. He launches himself into the air. The chain pulls tight. He swings like a furry pendulum, scrabbling for purchase. He lands on your face. Claws, panic, squeaking. You flail. You knock over a jug of ale. Ruskin bites your ear hard and scrambles up the tapestry hanging on the wall. The pin holding his chain rips loose from your tunic. He is free. He runs along the rafters, the chain dragging behind him, clinking against the wood. You chase him. You grab a broom. Ruskin, come down. He looks down at you from the high beam, chattering angrily. He grooms his tail. He has absolutely no intention of coming down. You spend the next 3 hours trying to coax him down with walnuts, cheese, and soft pleading noises. Eventually, he gets hungry and descends, allowing you to scoop him up. You examine your ear. It is bleeding. You examine the tapestry. It has snagged threads. You realize that a squirrel is a lot like the medieval world itself. Beautiful, wild, and prone to sudden, painful violence. You secure the chain again. You stroke his head. He purrs, a weird, bruxing sound of contentment. You forgive him. You are a soft touch. But as you nurse your bitten ear, you realize that perhaps you need an entertainment that doesn't involve teeth. You want a story. You want drama. You want violence, but violence that happens to other people, or better yet, to things that aren't even alive. You have heard a bell ringing in the market square, a different sound of bell from the church or the leper's warning. It is a high, frantic tinkling, accompanied by a strange, squawking voice. Puppets. You have heard of them. Traveling shows where wooden figures beat each other with sticks. It sounds safe. It sounds funny. It sounds like exactly what you need after being assaulted by your own pet. You tuck Ruskin into his squirrel house, a small, dome-shaped pottery vessel with a hole in the side filled with wool, and you head out. You are going to see the puppets. You are going to laugh at wooden suffering. Little do you know, medieval puppetry is not Sesame Street. It is Fight Club for dolls. And the punchline is usually a concussion. You have arrived in the market square, drawn by the high-pitched, unnatural shrieking that cuts through the ambient noise of bartering and bleating sheep. A crowd has gathered around a small, striped tent, a booth made of canvas stretched over a wooden frame. At the top is a small window, a proscenium arch for the miniature world you are about to enter. You push your way to the front. The smell of the crowd is familiar by now, unwashed wool and onions, but the energy is different. It isn't the religious awe of the mystery plays or the drunken chaos of the football match. It is the anticipation of cruelty. A puppet pops up. He is grotesque. He has a hooked nose that nearly touches his chin, a humped back, and a cap with a bell. He is carved from wood, painted in garish reds and yellows, and his expression is a permanent, maniacal grin. He bows to the audience and then he speaks. But it isn't a human voice. It is a jarring, rasping squawk, a sound that seems to vibrate in your teeth. Rooty tooty tooty. This is the ancestor of Mr. Punch, the anti-hero of the puppet world. He is joined by another puppet, his wife, or perhaps a neighbor. They exchange a few lines of dialogue that are mostly insults. Then, the inevitable happens. The first puppet produces a stick. Thwack. He hits the second puppet over the head. The crowd erupts in laughter. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The second puppet falls down. The first puppet dances a jig of victory. He sings a song about sausages. Then, a new puppet appears, a constable, or perhaps a devil. Thwack, down he goes too. This is the essence of medieval puppetry. It is violence distilled into its purest, most slapstick form. There is no moral lesson here. There is no redemption arc. There is just a wooden man with a stick solving all his problems via blunt force trauma, and it is hilarious. Mainstream historical fact. The tradition of Punch and Judy has deep roots in the Italian commedia dell'arte, specifically the character of Pulcinella. While the fully formed Punch show wouldn't conquer England until the 17th century, medieval glove puppets were already performing similar skits involving domestic squabbles and beatings. The stick used by the puppet was essentially a slapstick, two pieces of wood hinged together to make a loud cracking sound upon the impact without actually doing damage. It is the literal origin of the term slapstick comedy. You watch as the puppet beats a baby, hangs the hangman, and outwits the devil himself. It is subversive. In your real life, you cannot hit the tax collector. You cannot laugh at the priest. But the puppet can. The puppet is the id of the peasantry, acting out every dark impulse you have ever repressed while hoeing turnips in the rain. There is a quirky fringe tidbit about the voice of the puppet. The performer, hidden inside the booth, uses a device called a swazzle, or pivot. It is a small instrument made of two strips of metal binding a piece of cotton tape or reed, held between the roof of the mouth and the tongue. It requires immense skill to use without choking. In fact, swallowing the swazzle was a genuine occupational hazard for puppeteers. Imagine dying because you inhaled a kazoo while pretending to be a homicidal doll. You find yourself cheering for the puppet. He is a monster, but he is your monster. He defies authority. He defies death. He defies the laws of physics. When he hits the devil, you feel a vicarious thrill. It is a small, safe rebellion. Historians still argue vigorously about the origins of puppetry in Europe. One school of thought claims it evolved from religious automata, moving statues of saints used in church services to awe the faithful. The word marionette is thought to derive from Little Mary, referring to puppets of the Virgin Mary. Others argue it goes back much further to ancient Greece and Rome, where puppets were used for social satire. The debate is essentially, did puppets start as holy idols or dirty jokes? Looking at the figure currently beating a crocodile with a rolling pin, you lean toward the dirty jokes theory. The show ends with the puppet bowing to thunderous applause. The puppeteer emerges, sweaty and red-faced, spitting out his swazzle to collect coins. You toss him a farthing. It was worth it. For 20 minutes, you forgot about your aching feet, your lost shoes, and your squirrel bite. You walk away, still chuckling. The violence of the puppets was cathartic. It was safe violence, wooden violence. But as you leave the market square, you hear a different sound, a deeper, more resonant sound. It is the blast of a trumpet, followed by the heavy, rhythmic thud of hooves on packed earth. Real violence is calling. You remember the sleeve you accepted from the lady in the garden. You remember the tournament. The puppets were just the warm-up. Now you are going to see the main event. You are going to see men encased in steel riding living battering rams at 30 miles per hour. You head toward the lists. The air is getting hotter. The dust is rising. You are about to trade the wooden slapstick for the steel lance. And this time, when someone gets hit, they won't just make a funny noise and pop back up. You have laughed at the puppets and nursed your squirrel bites, but now you are standing in a field of trampled grass, surrounded by a noise so deafening it vibrates in your teeth. You are at the tournament. This isn't the romantic, sanitized jousting you see in movies with polite applause and clean armor. This is a medieval melee, a chaotic, swirling brawl of heavy cavalry where the primary goal is not just to break lances, but to break people. You are not fighting today. You lost your shoes at hazard, remember? You are a spectator, crushed against the wooden barrier of the lists, inhaling dust and hoarse sweat. But even watching is exhausting. The sun is blazing. You are wearing wool, and you have been standing here for hours while heralds shout names you don't recognize. Sir Guy of Gisborne, Sir Reginald the Heavy, Sir Thomas of the Big Lance. The heralds are the hype men of the Middle Ages. They scream the lineage, the deeds, and the heraldry of every single knight entering the field. It takes forever. You are bored. You are thirsty. You are wondering if the pig playing the drum is still performing back in town. But then, the trumpets blast. The ground shakes. Two knights charge. They are encased in plate armor that weighs upwards of 60 pounds. They are essentially human tanks. They lower their lances, solid ash poles tipped with iron coronals, blunted tips that look like little crowns to spread the impact. They are aiming for the chest or the head. Crack. The sound of wood shattering against steel is sickeningly loud. Splinters fly into the crowd. One knight is thrown backward off his horse, landing in the dirt with a metallic clatter that sounds like a kitchen shelf collapsing. The crowd roars. You roar. This is what you came for. But the joust is just the appetizer. The main event is the melee. Mainstream historical fact. The melee was a mock battle where two teams of knights fought each other simultaneously. Unlike the joust, one-on-one, the melee was a free-for-all. Knights captured each other for ransom. If you knocked a man off his horse and dragged him to your side of the field, you got his horse and his armor. It was war for profit, and because money was on the line, things got nasty. You watch as 20 knights slam into 20 other knights. Dust clouds obscure the action. You see swords swinging. You see maces denting helmets. You see a horse run loose, its reins trailing. It is glorious chaos. But then you notice the reality of it. The knights are sweating. You can see it dripping from their visors when they lift them for air. They are baking inside their metal shells. The heat exhaustion is as dangerous as the lances. You see a knight sitting on the sidelines, his helmet off, gasping for air, face purple. His squire is pouring a bucket of water over his head. He looks miserable. He looks like a boiled lobster. This is the hidden cost of chivalry. It is incredibly uncomfortable. You realize that your wool tunic, itchy as it is infinitely preferable to being vacuum sealed in steel under the July sun. There is a quirky fringe tidbit about tournament cheating that catches your imagination. Some knights used locking gauntlets, metal gloves that locked around the lance or sword so they couldn't be disarmed. It was illegal in many tournaments, but highly effective. Others used magic shirts soaked in vinegar and herbs, believing it made them invulnerable. You wonder if the purple-faced knight used the wrong vinegar. The fighting drags on. The novelty of watching rich men hit each other fades. The dust is coating your throat. You are hungry again. You think about the pottage back home. Eventually, a winner is declared. He is the one still standing up. He waves the lady's sleeve, now tattered and stained with mud, at the crowd. The lady in the stands claps politely. You suspect she is just glad she can go home and take off her hennin. You turn away from the lists. The noise is ringing in your ears. You have seen the pinnacle of medieval entertainment, the fusion of violence, pageantry, and heat stroke. It was impressive. It was loud. It was exhausting. You need something to soothe your nerves. Something quiet. Something musical. You head toward the great hall of the castle, or perhaps just the local tavern if the castle guards are feeling picky. You are going to listen to a bard. You imagine a sweet, melodious song about love and spring. You imagine drifting off to the gentle strumming of a lute. You are wrong. You are about to encounter the medieval ballad, and medieval ballads are not short. They are endurance tests set to music. You have escaped the heat and violence of the tournament, leaving the dust of the melee behind for the relative sanctuary of the great hall. The sun has finally set, and the space is lit by the flickering orange glow of torches mounted in iron sconces on the stone walls. The air is thick with the smell of roasted meat, spilled wine, and the wet fur of the hunting dogs that are currently fighting over a bone under the head table. You find a seat on a bench near the back. You are tired. Your feet hurt from the skating. Your ear throbs from the squirrel bite, and your head is ringing from the sheer volume of the day. You want to relax. You want to be entertained, but passively. You want someone to sing you a nice, short song about a flower, or maybe a funny story about a miller who falls in a well. Enter the bard. He is not the flamboyant, lute-strumming heartthrob of fantasy novels. He is a serious man with a face like a slab of granite and a beard that looks like it houses its own ecosystem. He carries a harp, or perhaps a vielle, an early fiddle that makes a sound like a cat being dragged backward through a hedge. He sits on a stool in the center of the hall. He tunes his instrument. It takes a long time. Then he begins. You are expecting a melody. You are expecting a chorus you can tap your foot to. Instead, what you get is a low, rhythmic drone. He isn't singing so much as chanting, his voice vibrating in a single, monotonous register that seems designed to bypass your ears and vibrate directly in your skull. He is performing a chanson de geste, a song of deeds. These are the blockbuster action movies of the Middle Ages, epic poems recounting the exploits of Charlemagne, Roland, or some local hero who hit a giant with a rock. The problem is the pacing. Modern storytelling cuts to the chase. Medieval storytelling lists every single item the hero packed for his lunch. He saddled his horse, the white one, the strong one. He checked the girth, made of leather, made of ox hide. He put on his helmet, shining, bright, polished with sand. He took his sword, the sharp one, the steel one, the long one. This goes on for 20 minutes. The hero hasn't even left the driveway yet. Mainstream historical fact: medieval minstrels and bards were walking encyclopedias. Because literacy was low and books were expensive, these performers committed hundreds of thousands of lines of poetry to memory. A full performance of an epic like the Song of Roland contains about 4,000 lines. If performed in its entirety, it would take several hours, sometimes spanning multiple nights. You are essentially trapped in a spoken word marathon without a bathroom break. You look around the hall. The other guests seem entranced. They are leaning forward, chewing on chicken bones, eyes fixed on the bard. To them, this is high drama. They are visualizing the helmet. They are deeply invested in the quality of the leather girth. You, however, are fighting a losing battle against your own eyelids. The music doesn't help. There is no harmony. There is no chord progression. It is monophonic, a single melody line played over and over and over again. It loops, it spirals, it drills into your brain. It is the medieval equivalent of having a ringtone stuck on repeat for 4 hours. Historians still argue vigorously about how exactly these epics were performed. Did the bards sing a distinct melody for every line, or did they use a form of chant fable, speaking the text with a musical accompaniment? Some scholars believe they improvised the music on the spot, reacting to the mood of the room. If that's true, the bard must think the mood of this room is comatose, because the tempo is slowing down to a crawl. You try to focus on the story. The hero has finally left his house. He meets a Saracen. They insult each other. The insults are lengthy. They discuss each other's lineage, their gods, and the questionable virtue of their mothers. This takes another 40 verses. Then they draw swords. Finally, action, you perk up. He struck the shield, the painted shield, the wooden shield. Splinters flew, wood flew, paint flew. He struck again, hard, strong, fierce. It is slow motion violence, narrated by a man who loves adjectives. There is a quirky fringe tidbit about medieval musical instruments that captures your attention. You notice the bard is playing a hurdy-gurdy, or organistrum. It is a bizarre mechanical violin with a crank wheel that rubs against the strings to create a continuous drone like a bagpipe. In later centuries, it would become the instrument of beggars, but right now, it is the height of technology. It sounds like a hive of angry bees trapped in a wooden box. The drone is hypnotic. Buzz, buzz, buzz. You feel your chin hit your chest. You jerk awake. You cannot fall asleep in the great hall. It is rude. The Lord might take offense and send you to the stables to sleep with the horses. Or worse, the bard might stop and stare at you until you wake up, which is a level of social awkwardness you are not prepared to handle. You drink some more ale. It is warm and flat, but it gives you something to do with your hands. The song continues. The hero has killed the Saracen. Now he is sad about it. He gives a speech to his horse. The horse listens attentively. You realize that the concept of a chorus, a catchy, repeated hook that everyone sings along to, is largely absent here. This isn't a sing-along, it's a lecture set to a drone. You keep waiting for the beat to drop. It never does. You start counting the verses. You lose track after 84. You start counting the torches on the wall. 12. You start counting the dogs. 5. You start wondering if you could sneak out without the bard noticing. But the bard has eagle eyes. He scans the room, making eye contact with anyone who looks like they're drifting. He raises his voice for the dramatic parts, shouting about blood and glory, then drops to a whisper for the death scenes. It is a masterful performance, technically. It is just so long. You find yourself longing for the chaos of the tavern. At least there, the noise was random. This is organized auditory assault. Finally, after what feels like a geological epic, the hero dies. He takes a long time to do it. He says goodbye to his sword. He says goodbye to his horse. He says goodbye to the grass. He prays. He sees an angel. He sees another angel. And then, with a final dramatic strum of the hurdy-gurdy, he breathes his last. The room is silent for a heartbeat. Then, thunderous applause. Men are weeping into their sleeves. The Lord throws a coin purse at the bard. "Encore!" someone shouts. "You freeze. No, please, no." But the bard smiles. He shakes his head. "Tomorrow," he says, "tomorrow I shall sing of his revenge." The relief that washes over you is physical. It is over. You have survived the ballad. You have endured the culture. The hall begins to clear. Servants start blowing out the torches, plunging the vast room into shadow. The dogs curl up under the benches. The smoke from the fire settles low, a blue haze in the dim light. You stand up. Your body is stiff from sitting on the hard bench. Your mind is mush. You have been entertained to within an inch of your life. You walk toward the door. The night air outside is cold and sharp, a welcome shock after the stuffy hall. The moon is high, casting a silver light over the castle walls. You are exhausted, not the physical exhaustion of the fields, but the deep, bone-weary exhaustion of someone who has tried very hard to have fun for 12 hours straight. You have gambled, fought, watched puppets beat each other, and listened to a man drone on about shields. It is enough. It is more than enough. You head toward your sleeping quarters, whether that's a pile of straw in the barn or a shared bed in the loft. You don't care. You just want silence. You want the dark. You want to close your eyes and not see a pig playing a drum or a knight sweating in armor. You unlatch the door to your hut. It is pitch black inside. The fire has burned down to embers, just a faint red glow in the center of the room. It is quiet. You push open the door to your hut. The latch clicks with a sound that seems impossibly loud in the stillness of the night. You step inside, and the sensory overload of the day, the mud, the blood, the shouting, the droning bard, instantly vanishes, replaced by the heavy, damp silence of your own home. The fire you left earlier has burned down to a bed of sullen red coals. It casts a weak, pulsing glow on the wattle walls, making the shadows jump and retreat like nervous spirits. The air inside is cold, but it is a still cold, distinct from the biting wind outside. It smells of old ash, dry straw, and the sleeping pig in the corner who lets out a long, contented sigh as you enter. You are exhausted, not the good, clean exhaustion of a day spent plowing a field, but a deep, vibrating weariness that settles in your marrow. You have spent the last 12 hours desperately trying to be entertained. You have risked your limbs for a pig's bladder, stood for hours watching biblical carpentry, and listened to a man recite the entire genealogy of Charlemagne. You have worked harder at having fun than you have ever worked at harvesting wheat. You sit down on the edge of your bed, or rather, the communal family mattress. The straw rustles loudly. You begin the slow, stiff process of unpeeling your layers. Your tunic is stiff with dried mud. Your hose are sagging. You are still missing your shoes. You hear the tolling of a bell in the distance. It is deep, slow, and authoritative. This is the curfew bell. Mainstream historical fact. The word curfew comes from the old French phrase couvre-feu, meaning cover fire. In medieval towns, this bell wasn't just a suggestion that you should go home. It was a mandatory safety regulation. It signaled that everyone had to dampen or cover their hearth fires to prevent the wooden city from burning down while everyone slept. It was the lights out for the entire civilization. You grab an iron poker and rake the ashes over the glowing embers. You don't want to extinguish them completely. Starting a fire from scratch with cold flint in the morning is a nightmare you don't want to deal with. You just want to put them to sleep, banking the heat so a single breath can wake them up at dawn. The red glow fades to gray. The room plunges into near total darkness. You strip down. Medieval people generally slept naked, or perhaps in a simple linen shift if it was freezing. There is a quirky fringe tidbit about medieval sleepwear, or the lack thereof. While they slept nude, they almost always wore a nightcap. The belief was that the head was the chimney of the body, and if you let heat escape from your scalp, your humors would unbalance and you'd wake up dead, or worse, melancholy. So there you are, shivering in the buff, but wearing a tight-fitting linen coif tied under your chin like a baby. It is a look that screams dignity. You slide under the heavy wool blanket. It is scratchy, heavy, and smells of sheep, but after a few minutes, it traps your body heat. You curl your knees to your chest. The straw mattress pokes you in the hip. You wiggle until you find a depression that fits your body. You lie there, listening. The world outside is silent. No carts, no shouting, no bards, just the wind. Historians still argue vigorously about the medieval experience of the night. Was it a time of abject terror, ruled by fears of demons, witches and night walkers, criminals? Or was it a cherished time of privacy and freedom, the only hours when the church and the Lord couldn't tell you what to do? Some scholars argue that the night was the enemy, while others suggest it was a playground for subversion. As you lie there, feeling the ache in your legs from the skating, you suspect it's a bit of both. You are safe, but the dark feels thick, heavy with the unknown. You close your eyes. Images from the day flash behind your eyelids. The pig hitting the drum, the knight falling off his horse, the puppet beating the devil. It all seems like a fever dream now. Did you really do all that? Or was it just a collective hallucination induced by bad ale and desperation? You realize that medieval fun is a lot like medieval life. It is intense, it is physical, and it leaves a mark. You didn't just watch entertainment, you survived it. You endured the leisure time. But now, the endurance is over. The pressure to be happy, to be loud, to be part of the mob is gone. There is only the quiet. You take a deep breath. The air is cold in your nose, but warm in your lungs. Your heartbeat slows. The adrenaline of the gamble, the fight, and the hunt drains away, leaving you heavy and soft. You are just a person in a hut, under a blanket, waiting for the sun. The entertainment didn't fix your life. You are still poor. You are still cold. You still have to plow the field tomorrow. But for one day, you weren't just a cog in the feudal machine. You were a player. And that is enough. You pull the blanket up to your chin. The pig snores again. The embers crackle softly under the ash. You let go. The fire is covered. The bell has stopped ringing. The village has dissolved into the shadows, leaving only the outline of the rooftops against the starry sky. The mud has frozen over again, smoothing out the footprints of the mob and the tracks of the wagons. The noise of the day has been swallowed by the vast, ancient silence of the night. You are warm now. The scratchy wool feels heavy and protective, a shield against the cold. Your breathing settles into a slow, steady rhythm, matching the quiet pulse of the sleeping world around you. The aches in your legs, the sting of the cold, the memory of the noise, it all drifts away, fading into the distance like a boat pushing off from the shore. Imagine the darkness as a soft, velvet curtain that has been drawn around your bed. There is nothing left to do, no one to impress, no rules to follow. The games are over. The work is done. You can simply be. You can drift on the tide of sleep, carried gently toward the morning. The medieval world is hard, yes, but the sleep is deep. It is the sleep of the just and the exhausted. It is waiting for you. Let the darkness hold you. Let the silence fill you.